Okay, so I'm gonna give a little bit of a life update, and then I'm gonna do a video, the best and worst parts of dating trans women, along with my nightmare dating story, which will tie into this. My personal life, if you can't see, I'm moved into the new apartment. Thank you so much for everybody that has supported me via my website, which you should be sure to check out. And speaking of that, I just filmed my first scene with another guy for my website, www.straightfelon.com. So you really might want to check that out. It will not be put on YouTube. It's one of those things you need a credit card to see. But I decided to do this video. A lot of people often ask me like why, like, okay, when I dated one trans woman, why? But like, why, am I like stuck on this? Which isn't the thing. It just, it's what I like. I don't know why. Maybe this list will illuminate you. Some of this list isn't so much like benefits of trans women as much as it is shitting on cis women, and I'm okay with that. The first one would be that cis women want to call you dad to their 4 kids, and trans women just want to call you daddy. Like, the amount, especially once you hit my age, I would say like once I got to my late 20s, I wasn't like one of these dudes that was like, oh, I'll never date a single mother. But you have to, be realistic. That's a big investment. And, I'm sure it can be very rewarding, but in the short term, it's like, it's a lot, man. And I noticed that it almost became like an inevitability once I hit my late 20s. And then I noticed there was a whole other thing where once I started dating women kind of in their late 20s or older, it was almost, I hate, it sounds mean, but man, the ones that didn't have kids, that was almost became like a red flag too. But yeah, this leads into number 2, which is like that they're not full of themselves. It's actually kind of sad. Like a lot of them have like way less self-worth than they should have, especially compared to like the undeserved confidence that I see so many cis women with. I remember, I wish I did have a screenshot of this profile at one time, and the profile was a bigger woman, and I prefer bigger women, especially of cis women. That's like kind of all I like. But there is a certain like, you know what I mean? I don't know how to say it. But anyways, her profile was nothing but requirements. Like, you must make this much money, which by the way, it did not look like she was doing all that well. You must be this tall, you must be a real man, all this stuff. Like, you could tell it was one of those people that had been like spited really bad and like, I'm gonna show them and get on Tinder and change their bio. But I was just thinking like, man, I could not imagine doing that. Like I am so valuable. This is what you need to date me. And it's like, and to be on like fucking Tinder, like thinking I deserve all that. This leads into the third one, which, and I've touched on this before, is, and maybe this is just a specific one to me, but the level of acceptance. I never really had that much luck with, like, I guess you would say like high class, high value women. And then, when I got later in life and suddenly I'm 30 years old and I'm not a homeowner, I'm living in sober houses, all this shit. I couldn't get women with simple retail jobs really to match with me, man. Like, I was getting, shut out by like the girl that was delivering pizza. And that's, and I'm not saying like I deserve more than that, but I was just like, below that. So it was, I never looked at it like that, like, oh, I'm not even good enough for these women. But it really did go to my head when I started like really getting to know my ex, like her accomplishments, and like, she's speaking these different languages. And it was like, I didn't have access. These type of women weren't fucking with me. Like, are you kidding me? Like, she worked in medicine, dude. It was just, it seemed like a no-brainer, man. I could not believe, I'm gonna say it like, they've done, and I know this sounds like a bit of an incel opinion, as they say, but they've done like little experiments on Tinder where they put up a profile of a guy that is, conventionally, you know, he's got a tough time in the world as far as looks. Like, he was not dealt the best hand. And, I like to think I'm like a decent looking dude. I literally make my living off my looks. And on Tinder, you would be amazed at how poorly I do. And when you're like a kind of average, or God forbid, below average and short looking dude on a dating app, nothing's happening for you at all. And I've seen those same experiments ran with women that, would be the equivalents. And they literally can't even keep up with the messages. Man, if you got any homegirls, I'm telling you, look at their dating app messages. It's amazing. When I saw it for the first time, it was like, oh, this is why it's so hard. It is literally like, dude, they must have to turn notifications off on their phone. It's fucking nonstop. If you're like even slightly attractive, it's just the playing field, man, is not level. And this leads to my third one. This is just personal anecdotal, and it's one of my biggest pet peeves with cis women on dating apps, is that trans women are willing to meet up right away. And maybe that's just the nature of Grindr, that you can like get laid in 15 minutes. But I had been through this bullshit where like these women want to text for a month before they meet. And I'm about to tell the story of somebody I talked to for a month and ended up being nothing like what I thought. I mean, it was you build up an idealized version. It's actually not conducive to an online relationship to talk so much in the beginning. It just doesn't work. Every time I've seen somebody that just like meets and goes out for coffee, you get a quick, if you don't like the person off the rip. It's like you can tell more from 5 seconds of that conversation than 5 weeks of texting. That's just like a personal thing for me. Like, both of the trans women I met off Grindr, which is by far the best dating app for straight men, it's not even close. I was like talking to them within a couple hours as opposed to a couple weeks. This is leading into, before we get to the negatives, which is a little bit more somber and less humorous. I'm going to tell you about like my nightmare Tinder dating story. And I oscillate back and forth on like feeling bad about telling this story. But I can remember back in the moment of time when this happened and how just pure embarrassed and mortified I felt. Like, you'll understand why later. And I thought to myself, you know what, John, you're going to definitely tell a ton of people about this, and you should not feel bad for making people laugh, because what she is putting me through is unforgivable. So I'm going to get into that story. I apologize for the editing. This is filmed completely out of chronological order. We had some technical difficulties, still struggling through them. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to talk about one of my worst dating experiences. And this is actually like one of the main reasons I kind of like gave up on cis women. Not exactly, but like after this was like the last time I went out with a woman before I met the first trans chick. And it was just so goddamn awful and just so reflective of all my experiences almost with cis women. It was just like, man, I'll keep, even though it didn't work out, like I'm going to keep trying with the trans woman. I had matched with this girl on Tinder 2 or 3 weeks before we actually hung out. We talked heavy, man. Like, I mean, all day, every day. And now that I look back, I can see that she was probably tailoring her responses to what I would like, just because she was nothing like that in person. There's also this thing, too, I've noticed with online dating, where the more you talk to each other and text before actually meeting, the worse it goes. Because, for one, you can pretend to be whoever you want on the internet, which is why it's so crazy to me. These women are like, yeah, I actually want to like talk and text for like a couple weeks first before I meet you. You might be a weirdo. Like, yeah, like it isn't hard to hide being a weirdo over text. It's a million times easier. I don't know. Not to mention that it's not just like a person lying, but there's another side of that coin where we build that other person up into an idealized version, and they never match those standards. Because when you
only text, you get a little bit of their personality, but we kind of fill in the blanks on our own way. And I've noticed that, like, the longer I talk to somebody over text, the more different they seem when I finally meet them. But we had talked for so much that I assumed at very least we would like get along as like platonic friends. So I had like accepted a date I should not have, which was a first date that was an all-day tubing trip, an overnight camping trip, set up in a way of which I would be stranded there. I think I got there around noon, and I would be stranded until the next morning. And not only was it just with her, it was with like 5 other couples. There was like 10 or 12 different people, all of which were strangers to me. Now, let me tell you something. Here's the thing. I liked literally everybody on that trip except the girl, except my date. We got there and she didn't really look like her pictures, which isn't, that's kind of par for the course with Tinder. And I could kind of tell she was hitting them with some filters, but she wasn't bad looking. Like if her personality would have been good, I'd have been perfectly happy. But as soon as I meet her, like I said, I could tell she was different. She kind of like purported herself as like this responsible kind of, fun, but kind of reserved person. And then when I get there, I remember, I'm a bigger dude and she was a bigger gal. And we have this like little tube and we get like a tiny bit of air in it to where it's literally like deflated and we aren't even on it. And she's like, okay, let's go tubing. And I'm like, yeah, like, let's check this first to make sure we don't sink in the middle of the river, like with all our shit. And she goes, yeah, I'm not really like a check person. I kind of just go with the flow. And you could tell she was like trying to sound like, oh my God, I'm so, like random and spontaneous, but it just came off like an idiot. Like, dude, like I'm looking at this raft and our 2 big asses. And it's like, we aren't even going to make it off the freaking sandbar. And it did, and we didn't. So we put more air in it. And then eventually she starts drinking. And I had told her that, I was on probation. I couldn't drink. Now when that happens, I'm not weird about other people drinking, I had told her just I wouldn't. Now, here's the thing. I am a stranger in a group of like 12 people. So you would think like the social cues would be like to try to make me feel comfortable. And she got just so hammered that she was basically gone. She did end up passing out, but she was throwing up in the water and like kind of forgot about me. So I'm just like sitting here quietly. Everybody else is drinking and other people aren't getting quite so drunk. Thankfully, one of her friends like made an effort to try to talk to me, but it was just so apparent within 2 hours that this was not, I wasn't into her. I remember like every time she would walk away to like use the bathroom or something, all of her friends would like come around like a bunch of sharks and they'd be like, so do you like her? Do you like her? Do you like her? I could tell this was like kind of probably a perpetual thing. Like she brings guys along who don't stay. And I remember too, when we were talking with her, she was one of those girls that's like, guys don't want to do anything but fuck. They have sex with you and then they leave. They just ghost you. And I was like, well, you could try like not having sex with them the first night. And she's like, well, then they don't even come in the first place. And I'm like, well, so that doesn't make sense. But anyways, also the other thing was every other woman on this trip had a boyfriend. So apparently there are men who are willing to commit. And man, it just put me it made me real uncomfortable. Ooh, and I forgot about this. So she was also like, I don't know if you would say a pathological or compulsive liar. I remember she dropped some hints over text. Like I remember one time she started implying, yeah, when I lived in Miami, I got into some pretty serious stuff. And I was like, is she trying to imply like she was involved in organized crime? And then she went, yeah, I got hooked up with some Colombians. Keep in mind, this is like a 33-year-old white woman. Like they're exactly who the cartels want to work with. Somebody who's going to tell on you guaranteed right away. And she's like, and I could tell she was like throwing it out there, trying to get me to bite. Like, oh, what do you mean? But I was literally like so embarrassed for her telling these lies that like I just ignored it. It made me feel really uncomfortable. So then when she starts drinking, she starts doing the same thing, like just to and the whole group's ignoring her as she says like, yeah, I was in Colombia messing with the cartel and I was selling bricks to CEOs. And it was just like so pathetic. Oh, and she insisted she was a stand-up comedian too, which I took to mean like she had done some open mics. She was also extremely vocal about being a sex addict, which is like whatever, but like it was done in a very like we'd be out in public and she'd be like, I'm a sex addict and he's an addict too, so we understand each other. And I was just like, man, I don't say this to be mean about her, but at the time I remember being really pissed for like how like mortified of embarrassment she made me. And the fact that she was clearly like dishonest about, who she kind of projected herself to be. So finally, night came around and, I thought it was pretty obvious that like, I wasn't interested and I was clearly not into this girl, but she clearly wanted me. And I thought that, the social cues had kind of read that I wasn't interested. And like a normal person would have been like, okay, let's just, make what we can for the night as friends. But I maybe it was the intoxication. I don't know. They later ate a handful of mushrooms, but later at night, they kept trying to have, initiate sex with me. And I remember we were in a tent with 2 other people and I was like, oh, hell no. And the thing was, like I said, I wasn't unattracted to her. I mean, the personality, yes. But I already knew if I would have okay, let's just hook up. She would have turned that against me. Because when we had been talking before, she was rah, rah, rah. Men never want to commit. They just sleep with you and then ghost you. And I was like, well, maybe don't sleep with them the first night. And she got mad about that. But anyways, everybody else on the trip was couples though. So I could already tell if I would do that, she would turn it into like, oh, you just used me. So I didn't. And then the next morning she it was pretty quiet. We weren't really looking at each other, talking a lot. And she kind of half-heartedly said something about like, oh, see you later. And I figured I wouldn't really hear back from her, but sure enough, she had hit me up like, hey, I want to see you again. And I just I felt bad, but I was like, I just really was not feeling that on any level. And yeah, like that's another thing too, man. It might not all have been like sunshine and rainbows with the trans woman, but man, after that date, that was the last time I ever went out with a cis woman. It was like, man, it was left a real sour taste in my mouth. But going down to the list now of like the worst parts of dating trans women. So this one's easy. Number 1, by far, without a doubt, and I see this in the comments a lot, the unprompted debate. I don't know what it is with people like, it's like all these like Ben Shapiro videos or something where they want to like own you in debate in the YouTube comment section. And it's so goddamn sad. Like, and I say this like, sometimes I hear from like trans people like, oh, these comments are getting me down. And it's like, man, if you're leaving a comment like that on the internet, like you're not in a good place. It's definitely like, no, I'm not saying that like, oh, I feel bad for you, it's wrong, but it's like, I would never let somebody like that, like make me feel bad. I always say, if somebody pulled up in a nice car and they're good looking and clearly successful, they got a family and said something mean to me, I'd probably feel pretty bad. But for like some weirdo on the internet, no, I don't give a fuck. You know what it reminds me? Like one time I went to this Deadmau5 concert back before he was real famous. And when it let out we were in Detroit, there was like this schizo homeless person with a megaphone and a cardboard sign that said, repent for Jesus. And he was, oh, the devil robot music. And all these like young college kids from U of M with bright futures, like engaged him in debate. Like, God isn't real, man. Atheism, like with their 8th grade, edgy liberal takes. And I was like, dude, you are more embarrassing than that homeless guy. At least he's like he's crazy. Why would you care what he says? But in the debate too, there's just something so inhuman about it. It's like, how would you say, like ignoring the forest for the trees? A great analogy. There was a very popular Super Nintendo game called Final Fantasy III. In America, it was if you went to the store and rented it or bought it, you played Final Fantasy III. It was a game with espers and Taro as the main character. It was real great. It was like a groundbreaking game. Now, in Japan, there had already been a couple more Final Fantasy games that never made it to America. So in Japan, that was Final Fantasy VI. But if you play that in America, which everybody, when you're talking to people about this game, you're not talking to somebody in Japan 99.99% of the time, and it's Final Fantasy III. But there's this thing where dorks online like especially back in the day before the internet was like a little more accessible, where they would argue, they would call it, oh, actual Final Fantasy 6 is the actual game. Final Fantasy 3 was something on the regular Nintendo. And it'd be like, okay, dude, but we're talking about Final Fantasy, because we're two Americans. It was Final Fantasy 3 to us, dude. But then they'll just ignore it. And it's, I don't know if it's like the fetishization of Japan, but I don't think it's that. I think it's like they are so hooked on the fact that technically this game was the sixth in the series that they ignore the fact that they're talking to a human who experienced that game as Final Fantasy 3, and then the fact that they experienced that game as Final Fantasy 3. It's like, you know, if a PlayStation 5 said Xbox on it, but it's still a PlayStation 5, like it would, like they couldn't, it would cross people's heads. And it's like, hey, you can get a surgery so it says fucking Xbox again. But I don't know, it's like I get it, man. There's something to it, like biology means something, but not what we really like. 99 times out of 100 when we're talking about girls, like, you know, girls, you know, they're like this, ha ha ha, they be shopping, ha ha ha. It's something that applies not to fucking biology. It's something that applies to like the human spirit. And that's why I think science is so fucking lame, dude. It just ignores all of that. Like, you know what? If you like, the distinction could be made, yeah, in like a biology book, in a biology class, but in everyday, like in your everyday conversation, it does not have relevance, and it makes you look like a weirdo to hyper focus. Like, I know in your head you think like you're gonna be who's the other guy? I don't know, one of the Jordan Peterson doesn't go so hard on the trans stuff, but Ben Shapiro or Matt Walsh, in their head they're like, oh, I'm gonna own these, like, somebody's gonna record me and it's gonna be like this blue-haired person crying, and I'm gonna, you know, hit them with like 4 talking points that I memorized. And it's just, dude, it's not a good look. And it just it looks very, it's off-putting, and it's off-putting not just to like people who care about that community. People that care about the community will get all mad and shit, but like even to the average person who isn't invested into this argument at all, it looks very weird. It's very projecting type. And damn, I forgot my last point. Oh, the last word, the last worst part is doing what I call bathroom guardian, which is something that originally did not bother me, but eventually came to infuriate me. And that's when like a trans woman asks you to stand outside a public bathroom or changing room they're using, you know, out of fear of, you know, something happening, feeling uncomfortable. And I remember I didn't really, especially in changing rooms, I didn't really get what was happening at first. It wasn't until later that she said like, hey, I appreciate you, I don't feel comfortable. And I was like, oh, that's why. And like suddenly I was like, hated everybody in that Victoria's Secret. Like, you made her feel uncomfortable, I want you to die. And I felt the same way at my own local gym a couple weeks ago. She asked me to stand outside the bathroom, and I was looking around all these people I see every day, like seething, like I want to rip your fucking head off, because not every bathroom is like that. I don't know. That's I was thinking of doing a YouTube skit where it's like, you know, I'm dressed like a Navy SEAL or something, or like a Secret Service bodyguard, and I'm standing outside various bathrooms as like trans women walk out and say like, thank you for your service. But really though, man, it's what made me angry about it is one day I broke it down, which was like, okay, what's the fear? That somebody is going to say something rude and it's going to hurt my feeling? No, because you don't need me outside for that, you know. It's I broke it down that it's like a fear of like, no matter how far-fetched, it's like a fear of potential safety. And that, like, I've said this before, I'm not like a tough dude or anything like that, but that is one thing that like really drives me crazy, is like the fact that, you know, she would feel, for simply using a bathroom in public, would feel threatened. That she even has to worry about like, oh, where am I going to go today that I have to, I mean, I gotta hit my vape right now because it fucking infuriates me. It's just you know, there's kind of a lot of trans people now, And if there was a problem with it, man, like it'd have happened by now. It's just I don't know. And even then, I was like, before I met a trans person, I was like, yeah, whatever. Like, you can just use the bathroom at home. Now it's like, nah, fuck that. Like, I don't want her to have to compromise in any way. Which kind of leads me, I guess this would be a third. That's a kind of a serious one. The third would be pretty serious, which would be dysphoria. So that was like, I'd read about that, and like, this sounds so condescending, but I had like not doubted the authenticity or degree of it, but like I remember it was described as like impossible to explain and understand, and also impossible to help. And I was like, oh, okay, I think you're just kind of making your my thing's the hardest type deal. But I remember the first time I saw it, and what was so heartbreaking about it was how like illogical it was. My ex-girlfriend like was very beautiful and passed extremely well. The level where like passed 100% in pictures, and in person you really couldn't. The height may make you think, but it wouldn't be your first thought. Anyways, she was very lucky in the facial hair department. Like she had none, like half a sweep with a dull razor and like you're good for 2 days. So of all things, that would be like a very silly thing to get in your head about. And I remember like watching her in the mirror, like literally crying about it. And I tried to approach it with like logic, like, what do you mean? I tried to approach it with reality rather than I was like, okay, well, you don't like that. Let's get some, we'll get the laser hair, logic. Like, you don't have to have this forever. Okay. It's nothing now. This is what I tried explaining. You literally don't have a problem now. And then a week from now, you can get your first treatment. So, in the future, it's never going to be there. And it didn't help a bit. I pulled out the phone and made the appointment. So it's put into action. It didn't help a bit. And it just like, I remember it ate away at me. Another time, she responded incredibly well to injectable hormones. I got very large breasts very quick. And they were still growing. And normally she was very happy with them. And one day she was like looking at him and crying. And I said the same thing. I was like, are you kidding? Like, you're responding better than 95% of people. And think of it like this. They're constantly getting bigger. So every day of your life, you have bigger boobs than the day before. So every day of your life, you have the biggest boobs you've ever had. How many people can say that? Or maybe I guess a lot of whatever. But and none of it worked. And I remember I just like broke down crying. I was like, why can't you see it? Like why? How can this girl not see what I see? I remember the analogy I kind of assigned to it. It reminds me of like an anorexically skinny girl, like a skeleton who's probably going to die soon, standing in front of the mirror and like pinching their completely paper thin stomach and being like, oh, I'm so fat, just because like how illogical and totally going against reality it is. And it's also like very depressing just because like, man, she really can't see how beautiful she is. And it's like, man, how could you, I don't know. You eventually see like, damn, there's no combination of words I can say that can affect this. And it's such an illogical thought, it breaks your heart. That was some of the worst, that was some of the worst feelings I felt in that whole relationship. And that's kind of what turned me so like aggressive and violent towards any sort of phobia or questioning or making uncomfortable of her, is because all that stuff matters. Like all that stuff ties back to those feelings, I think. And that's why like I'm ready to like assault anybody who says anything. I don't know. That's anyways, going back to like a nicer topic. Anyways, a lot of people have been wondering. Yes, I do have one. You can find it on my website. Putting some videos up there tonight. It's been very successful. I was able to move into the new place. I'm going to do a vlog showing a tour, which isn't much. It's a small apartment in the hood. Maybe I'll show my neighborhood. But really, though, I really want to start doing more vlogs because I can only come up with so many topics like this. I still have my top 3 favorite types of gay dudes, and then some stories from my book. But I want to do some like vlogs on my life. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Please check out my website. I can't wait to. YouTube has been so amazing. It's like changed my life since I got monetized and have people following me. Thank you so much. Please like and subscribe and follow. What did it say? Ring that bell. Thank you.